Hello, water managers and SWMS users. I'm Russell Errett. I'm with the Water Management Systems Division out of the Hydrologic Engineering Center. I'm covering SWMS implementation, and we're using St. Louis as an example of how we implement SWMS. So this is a fourth part of a multi-part video series. So if you want to see the parts before this, go through the playlist and see those. So we have covered the St. Louis district overview, and we've gotten into some of the weeds of how we've implemented SWMS in St. Louis. And then we're going to continue with SWMS implementation with another watershed and how we've kind of built off of that implementation with other watersheds for another one. And then after this video, we will start going through SWMS implementation and some examples of usages, and then how we evaluate the SWMS performance against the legacy processes that we've had in the past. So we have covered, viewing precipitation, editing data, and we've gone into the modeling component of it for the Salt River watershed. Now we're going to talk about a different watershed, and we're going to talk about basically SWMS to SWMS. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, but we have the Mississippi, which is downstream of all of these watersheds, and now we need to feed that SWMS information and forecasting into another SWMS model run. And so let's go back to the overview for St. Louis. The Mississippi, like I said, bisects through the middle of the district here. All of these individual head watersheds, so the Salt River watershed, the Merrimack, Kaskaskia, Big Muddy, all feed into the Mississippi model, which kind of encompasses all the area that's in gray, also the Illinois River, the lower Illinois River, and the lower Missouri River, and the Quiver. So that's kind of a large model, if you will, but all of those get fed into the watershed. So before we even get to what comes into the boundary conditions that St. Louis is in charge of, let's talk about what comes into the district that's outside of our purview. So the Mississippi River at Locking Dam 22, we get information from Rock Island District, so they will provide a flow forecast at Locking Dam 22. We also get the National Weather Service, the RFC from NCRFC, they provide a flow forecast at Locking Dam 22, so we get to see both of those flow traces for forecasting. The same thing we get on the Illinois River at Valley City, we get that from Rock Island. They have the Upper Illinois, so we get that from Rock Island District. And we also have the NCRFC that provides a flow forecast at Valley City. So we see both of those for boundary conditions through our Mississippi model. And then the Missouri River at Herman, we get flow forecasts from NWD in Omaha for the Missouri River. And we also get MBRFCs, the Missouri River Basin River Forecast Center's flow forecasts at Herman. And then all the way down to the southern part of our district, like I said earlier, a lower end of our district gets affected by backwater from the Ohio River. So we get a stage forecast that we use for a boundary condition in the lower end of our district from LRD, the Lakes and Rivers Division. So out of Cincinnati, they'll provide us a stage forecast. And we also get a stage forecast for Cairo that we use at the boundary condition from LMRFC, the Lower Mississippi Valley River Forecast Center. So we use these as all boundary conditions that are outside of our district. They're kind of like outside of our district as set as boundary conditions. And then we have the inter-district boundary conditions. And so these are the boundary conditions that come from our other SWMS models that we run within St. Louis. So the Salt River at New London, and then we have the Merrimack River at Eureka, the Kaskaskia River at Vinity Station, and then the Big Muddy River at Murfreesboro. So there's kind of an overlap in these watersheds. So for example, like the Kaskaskia, the entire SWMS model encompasses everywhere that's in pink. But our Mississippi model extends all the way up to this point as a boundary condition because the backwater extends just downstream of this point at Vinity Station. So there's kind of almost a repeat of those areas so that we can get an accurate forecast of Mississippi. Same thing with Salt River. Salt River goes all the way to the confluence and actually includes part of the river for like our modeling for the lower Salt River, but we redo it again because we need to have a more accurate sense of that boundary condition going into the Mississippi. So we said all those are all run. This is kind of what the RAS model looks like within our district. I like to put it almost in this way a little bit differently. You can see the cross sections extending up in some of these watersheds here. So here's our boundary conditions here. You see the storage areas that are coming in. And then here's the boundary conditions that are being set for those areas that are going in those watersheds. So you can kind of see there's an overlap. This RAS model is kind of a beast. It's all 1D. So this is kind of something that's run during flood events that help predict what we need to do at the locks and dams, what we need to do for flood fighting. Also, this model is used for predicting where we need to dredge during low flows. So it's kind of the workhorse. There's a forecast that's done on the Mississippi River out of St. Louis for the entire district every single day of the year. So this is the workhorse model. So the boundary conditions that come outside of St. Louis, we have a script that's run. And so I said we get the core forecast and the RFC, the River Forecast Center's forecast. We put them into like a script. So these are individual plot windows that would come up within the CABI. But this would be the Lock and Dam 22 tailwater forecast. So black is the observed, red would be the Corps forecast. So anything that's red on any of these plots are going to be Corps of Engineers forecast. And then blue is the National Weather Service, the RFC's forecast. And then green is if we split the difference. So if we wanted to just hedge our bets and split between the two and use that as our boundary conditions, we can set those. So for example, up in here, whenever we're in regulated conditions where the gates are in the water at Lock and Dam 22, a lot of times for at least the first 24 hours, we're using Rock Island's flow forecast because they're dictating where the gates are going at those structures. So generally, if they're saying they're going to cut the gates or open the gates, we're hedging our bets on those because they're making those operational changes. If we're at an open river condition where the gates are out of the water because those are low flow structures, we might split the difference or use the weather service. Again, we don't like to put QPF into our forecast, but since the RFC might put 24 or 48 hours in there and we start seeing things materialize, we will likely go to the split difference to help gauge the runoff that we might see. If there's no rainfall, there's a lot of times it will be different, and I'll show you in a couple different spots here. But for example, the Illinois River, you can see that there's a rise for the core showing it, but there's a larger rise the RFC showing. So we might split the difference on this one. This might be a great place to split it because they just have a discrepancy on how high that rise is going to be. This is the Missouri River at Herman. As you can see, there's not much discrepancy for the first week, and then we start to see a divergent forecast farther out. So this is probably one where we would use the core because I don't know why this rise would have occurred unless there's some rainfall really far up in the watershed and just takes that long. But this might be something we question and send a message back to the core or the RFC to say, hey, why is there a difference, a week and a half out? And so that'll give us an idea what's going on. And then this is the stage forecast at Cairo. This is used to set that boundary condition, so you can see there's not too much of a difference between those two. So we might split the difference just to kind of set something that splits the difference between those two, the differences that might occur. So that's how we set boundary conditions for outside the district. And then obviously we use the SWMS forecast to set those boundary conditions for within those. And so once we run that model, we have plots that come out. So these are kind of plots that we like to generate and we put in on an internal page that kind of help water managers, hydraulics people, decision makers make decisions on what to do out in the field. So this is the Mississippi River at Louisiana. And so what we have is we have time of forecast. So we have a look back time. So there's all red back here is the observed, and we have flow. This is the observed flow value. And then we have a forecast window. Again, we're doing a 2-week forecast. And so this is during the flood event during 2019. So you can see is no QPF added. We're cresting around 24 feet. Flood stage is 15 feet here. So we're actually in flood operations at this point in time. We're above flood stage. 24 feet is kind of a significant value. But by adding QPF, we're starting to show like, well, if we add the rainfall, we're going to start breaking some of the, second and third all-time high records at this location. And we're going to get pretty close to the all-time record, which is 1993. And so this kind of gives an indication if we're saying this forecast, like, look, there's a possibility that this is going to happen. And it really starts bringing some of the experienced geotechs and decision makers out, and they start going through old notebooks like, okay, we need to maybe see what we did during 1993 and see what we should be prepared for. So it starts to get people almost ready for something 2 weeks ahead of time. Had we just been doing this, they might have just been like, oh, this seems like a typical flood we've just had because we just came off a flood that was almost 24 feet. That's just going to be the same flood. This is really indicating it's going to be something different. So I've always issued these things and say, don't use these as a face value and start making actual decisions off of it and start raising levies or closing things and doing things. Use it as a qualitative piece of information. What will you have to do if this starts materializing? What actions will you need to do? Start thinking about those actions and don't make them yet, but just start thinking about what those actions might be. Another thing we use these models for, this is a different event. This is actually just in June 2020. So this is during our environmental pool management, our locks and dams. And so we draw our pools down and try to grow wetland grasses along the periphery of the pools, the locks and dams. And so this is kind of something we do within our normal operations. And so what this does is communicates to our biologists and the people that are out in the field what our plans are and how they can help us do the monitoring. So they're going to go out and monitor Is the temperatures right? Are the soil conditions okay for starting growing? How well is the growth going? So in June, this will be June 25th, this is late June, this is an indication where they can go out and say, tell me how high the vegetation is growing and whether we can start bringing the pool up and start to put some of the roots or the stalks there underneath of the water so that they're actually fully submerged like kind of vegetation. So we generally do this for at least 30 days where we try to stay below this. And so the zone that we're most focused on when we're looking at these plots is just this zone here. This is where we try to stay drawn down to this lower green line as long as possible. Anything below that is just operations because of high flows for our locking dam. So we try to build the pool as quickly as you can to get to this line. As soon as we get this line, we drag our feet as long as we can to try to avoid getting the full pool and allow that vegetation growth to occur. So this is kind of a report that's done during environmental pool management. So it kind of gives you the number of days of growth at certain thresholds. So you've got 10 days of growth at 417, 11 days at another half foot up, 12 days, and then 12 days. So it kind of gives you a number of days. So again, we haven't hit that 30-day threshold for these elevation thresholds, but it kind of gives an idea. And this is an observation. So basically it's saying, okay, over the next 14 days, we should get 14 more days on top of this. So we should be getting close to that 30-day threshold if everything holds up like it's forecasted. This is really good information to convey to individuals out in the field rather than just verbally telling them about flow forecasts and what that might mean. They can actually visually see it. So this helps communicate a lot of this. So that's how we do the Mississippi. If you have any questions about our software, needing help, or looking for additional training, check out these links. They can also be found in the description below. Thanks for your time.